Okay, so we're going to ask ourselves whether or not we've met that 3-mark criteria. I've shown that I have a thorough understanding of what this card program was. At the moment, I'm suggesting that we're actually on a good understanding that is talking about most of the user's needs. And there's a couple of clear reasons why I'm thinking this. If we take a look at the scenario, we haven't included absolutely everything we could have to prove that we've read it, that we've thoroughly understood it, that we've got every single thing that to do with the card game program written down within my sort of like my write-up for it. So if I go back to this one, I've got to make sure that I talk about the fact that it's the maths teacher. I've got to make sure that I'm talking about it's to do with probability and improving it, and their knowledge of GCSE probability and the probability of playing with cards. I've also got to talk about the fact that the images are provided by the teacher, which hasn't been mentioned before. And I've got to make sure that I've covered each of those tasks that are underneath within the overview. So I'm going to add an extra section. I'm going to put an overview of the problem in so I can clear up anything that I have now missed. You might think, why not do it all in one go? You can do. It's absolutely fine with that one. All I'm suggesting is that the way that you should be working through this controlled assessment is continually looking at, right, well, that's the scenario. That is what I have got so far. This is where the marking criteria tells me that I should be. So what I'm going to try and do, just sort of adding an extra sort of section to it, is just make sure that if there's any detail that's in that scenario that I haven't talked about above, that I'm going to get it done. So I've got to talk about the fact of where it's based from. And I'm trying, if you look at the language that I'm using, to change it into my own words in some way, because just copying and pasting it wouldn't do me any favours. And I'm trying to summarise it in a way that I don't lose the detail, but I am very specific about it. So I'm talking about the fact that it gives the maths students a chance to practice their knowledge of playing cards, which is actually in the second paragraph in the scenario. I'm going to be talking about how they're going to be accessing the system and what they're going to actually see when they come to use it. I want to be able to talk about exactly what the user is going to experience from their point of view. So the students will be able to access the 5 backs of cards, and then the first one, I could put it over to the left as well, is just going to display as the card. At the moment, you'll see that I am not discussing anything to do with the code, what sort of looping I'm going to need or iteration I'm going to need. I'm not going to talk about the actual messages that are going to be displayed. I'm just talking about it from the point of view of the user and the student in this case, as to what they're going to experience. One other thing that I'll mention at this point as well, which is really useful, whenever you're writing about a specific program, especially within the controlled assessment, you want to make sure you're referencing who the user actually is. So I'm not actually talking about users of the program, I'm talking about the students. I'm talking about not the person who's designed the program, but I'm talking about the maths teacher. I'm being very specific with who's requested it and what they've requested from their program. Once the card has been flipped, the choice between higher or lower. So as I'm going through this one, I'm basically putting out step by step what the program's going to do. And actually, by putting this step into your write-up, you're not only helping the design and the overview of the problem and showing that you've got that thorough understanding of what's been requested of you, you've also got the kind of like the basis for making your data flow diagram afterwards, because if you start looking at this one, you're going to see that, well, actually, if they're going to be playing that card game, fine. Underneath, you're going to be presented with 5 backs of cards. So your first thing within your data flow diagram after the start will be display the 5 backs of cards and things along those lines. So the more detail you've got in the overview at this stage, the easier the next few and the subsequent stages are going to be. Now, I've put in brackets on here and I've gone back to add something to it, so that just because the cards have been provided to me, I'm going to say where they've actually been stored, just to make it as specific as possible. Because if I'm going to show a thorough understanding, I want to show my specificity, if that could be counted as a word, so what exactly they have to do. please feel free that if you see anything that I'm missing from this one, you can send it through via email, and I'll try and make sure that I add it in a moment. Should the students be successful? So I'm talking about it's kind of like a should, so it's kind of like an if question. You can kind of guess where the data flow diagram is going to go at that point. And I'm just going to add specific detail as I go. Okay, I've now demonstrated that I've got a thorough understanding and I've met almost all or all of the user's needs. This is where in my marking process I then have to prove or write a paragraph that explains why I think you've met those criteria. So I'd end up writing just a short paragraph that meets that 3-mark section that says that you've described it well, you've definitely got every element of that specification in there, including any questions that you've come up with and that you've tried to answer yourself. Losing my voice as well at this point. It will also talk about where there was gaps within the specification or gaps within the knowledge that you had. You went and researched it and you went and spoke with other people. That extra step at the bottom where we talked about the overview of the problem, also talks about the fact that, well, actually you've gone back and you've re-looked at it just to double check that your design of the solution is top notch, fully complete. I've got no issues there. Give 3 marks straight away. Good luck. Over to you.